Welcome into the block. I'm Emily Proud. Blake Brockermeyer and Carl Reed are also here. We've got some picks on the menu today, but let's start here. Ever since USC and UCLA announced that they were breaking away from the Pac-12, all the conference has done is exceed expectations. 4 Pac-12 teams are ranked in the top 15 of the AP poll. Only the SEC has more with 5. So it's time for some conference conversation. And we're talking Pac. Starting with the current standings here, USC, the only team with 2 conference wins. So they are understandably at the top. 5 teams 1-0 in conference play. It is very early, so this will definitely change a lot. But for a fun exercise, Carl and Blake ranked the teams with winning records, which is 8 of them. Now you agree on the teams in the top 4. USC, Oregon, Washington, and Utah, but not necessarily in the same order. We'll hit on that in just a bit. You're looking at Blake's right now, but I want to start with Carl. And I want to ask about the biggest discrepancy here. Washington State. Blake has them at 7, Carl at 5. So let's start on the positive end of things. Carl, why is Wazoo the 5th best team in the Pac-12?
I really like what they're doing right now. I like the way that Coach Dickert has changed their defense and turned their mentality around. I think a big road win over Wisconsin, a team that was heavily favored in that game, shows that they're serious. And for the first time in a long time, we have Washington State being mentioned again amongst college football programs. We never talk about them. Probably not since Mike Leach was the coach, but that was more talking about the coach than the actual program. I think they're doing a great job there, and I think Washington State is going to continue to play great football as the season goes on and position themselves well for a nice bowl game.
Blake, you have them a little further down at 7, so make your case for why Washington State isn't necessarily the 5th best team, but still up there in the top half.
Well, mostly it's because of their schedule. The Pac-12 to me is a wide open conference. It reminds me a little bit of the Big 12. And Wazoo is a solid team, really good home team. Like Carl mentioned, great road win at Wisconsin this year, but they're going to be a really tough out, but they've got some tough games ahead. And I think that's the difference between them being at the upper echelon of the Pac-12 to me, and being just a little bit down. But they have the capability to beat anyone, any weekend, and they're starting to hit strides on both sides of the ball right now.
Yeah, they are certainly fun to watch with Cameron Ward there at quarterback. Now, meanwhile, your number 2 and 3 teams are a little bit different. Blake favors Oregon, while Carl, you like Washington better, so let's just keep it simple here. Oregon and Washington, they play each other on November 12th in Eugene. So, Blake, who wins that game?
Well, I think it's Oregon because it's a home game, and that's how I decided between 2 and 3. I really like what Washington's doing this year. I like what I've seen with Michael Penix Jr. They've got a great schedule, avoiding USC and Utah this year. But I think the difference is going to come down to them playing at Oregon. That's a heated game, and 2 teams that don't like each other. I have a little bit more faith in Bo Nix, especially at home, than some people do. But Oregon's got a really tough last 3 weeks of their season with Washington, Utah, and of course the Civil War, which is always a really tough game.
Well, Blake, go ahead.
I prefer Washington in that game, and I just say it because it's hard for me to bet on Bo Nix in a situation like that. And I think the Washington offense really does a great job of taking advantages of the weakness that another team has. And I think that Kalen DeBoer just has Washington a little better positioned at this time right now.
I like, too, the fact that Oregon has seen the best team in the country already week 1. And they played Georgia. They've seen what the best players, the best team looks like. They're not going to see a tougher team than that for the rest of the season. So everything after that should be a little bit easier. Of course, it's never easy. But I think that gives them a little bit of advantage, even though they got smoked by Georgia. At least they got that out of the way, and they got to see what big boy football really looks like.
Yeah, Oregon has responded really well since losing that opener, too. And Bo Nix himself has also looked pretty solid. But Blake, I've got to ask you this because you're looking at records. You're looking ahead, which we like that. It's very smart because that's how this thing is going to be decided. But ultimately, Washington doesn't have to play what you guys, or some people, view as the top two teams in the Pac-12, which is Utah and USC. So how much does it help Washington out that they don't have to face those two?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, that's two of the toughest games in the Pac-12 that you get to avoid until maybe the championship game. So it's a huge advantage for them. It's incredible what they've done so far early. It's still real early, so we'll see if they can continue to make strides. But they've been a really impressive team. I love what they're doing. Michael Penix Jr., like we talked about earlier, is putting together an incredible year, and so I think. A lot of recruits on the West Coast need to reevaluate Washington, because they're a program that is traditionally a really good program that develops well, and it looks like they're fixing to get the ball rolling again. And Husky Stadium is a really tough place to get a win at. The last few years it hasn't been, but it looks like when they play at home this year, it's going to be a tough out for anyone.
I'm loving the fact, too, that there's so much parity. I mean, we don't know who's going to win on any given Saturday. But, Carl, I'll ask you this. We have to talk about USC. Both of you guys put USC at the top of your lists. When it comes to who wins the Pac-12, Carl, are you taking USC or the field?
I'm going to take USC. Okay. I think they have a coach that's won conference championships. He's been in the college football playoffs multiple times. I think he has the best quarterback also. They're going to be a real problem. And even though they played an ugly game against Oregon State, they found a way to win, which is ultimately what this is all about, finding a way to win. I think they got a big game coach, a big game quarterback. They had the best receiver in Jordan Addison. I just think they're going to be a really tough out, and I see them winning the Pac-12.
Blake, I hope we're not forgetting about that, because I was going to ask you about Utah, which won it last year and was the preseason favorite coming in this year. So you're taking the field.
Yeah, I would take the field. I think USC is probably the best team in the Pac-12, but I'm not completely sold on them. I think they've got one really tough game coming up against Utah in a couple of weeks, and they're in the driver's seat. Obviously, Caleb Williams is doing his thing and is going to be a top pick in the 24 draft. But Oregon, Washington, Utah, those three teams could easily beat them on any given day. Oregon State almost did. They're not as talented as those three teams. So as much as I like USC and what they're doing, still don't completely trust their defense. And I could see any of those three teams beating them in the championship game.
I think sometimes we give teams like Oregon State too much credit for almost winning. Almost doesn't count in the game of football. Utah really made my head hurt the way they got dominated against the Florida Gators, and the Florida Gators is not one of the top teams in the SEC. I just still got to go with USC in this situation.
I like it. One last note on USC. They currently have created 14 takeaways and have turned the ball over 0 times. That is certainly a recipe for success and a recipe for defeat for Oregon State, who turned the ball over multiple times in that game. This is what I think is kind of interesting, though. 5 of the 8 teams that we listed have transfer quarterbacks, including the top 3 teams for both of you. So how much has the portal and this one-time transfer rule contributed to this, I'll call it a Pac-12 renaissance? Carl, start with you.
Well, you're able to take care of an immediate need right away. In the past, if you had an issue at quarterback, you had to recruit better. You had to hope that maybe a true freshman can come in or maybe a JUCO guy. These situations, you have quarterbacks who had a lot of game experience that were able to come in and play right away. And in the case of Washington and USC, you're talking about guys that have actually played previously with the coaches that they're playing for now. So there's a complete familiarity there with the system. So I think that gives you a tremendous advantage when you're able to get a high-level signal caller going into especially your first year as a head coach running the program, but it's not your first time working with the particular quarterback that you have.
Yeah, it's a game changer now with the portal because this is the most important position on the field. USC gets potentially the #1 draft pick in the 24 draft, who's got experience at Oklahoma under Lincoln Riley. I mean, that's a dream come true at USC, who's produced a ton of great quarterbacks over the years. And Washington hit the home run of maybe of all of the portal this year with Michael Penix Jr., a guy who at Indiana last year was banged up and wasn't quite the same. So excellent pickups for them. Cam Ward at Wazoo was a great pickup for them. They lost their quarterback to Arizona, so it's a tough deal to lose your quarterback. But nowadays, just go in the portal and pick somebody else up, and you sometimes can upgrade.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But the elephant in the room is the fact that the Conference of Champions has not put a team in the playoff in 6 years. With all of this parity that we love on a week-to-week basis, Carl, does that change this year?
Well, I think that we still have a lot of season to play off before we decide that who's going to get into the playoffs, because right now we have 3 teams at the top in Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State, and everybody else keeps acting like they may not want to take that fourth place spot. If USC wins out and wins the Pac-12, I do think USC is in the best position to get that fourth playoff spot. But it's a lot of football left to be played, so you want to be careful before you crown somebody.
Yeah, I think USC and I think Oregon both have a legit chance. Washington, of course, is undefeated as well, but Oregon lost to Georgia, who I think most people would consider the best team in the country right now. They went out, beat USC, run the table, then I think they're going to definitely be in the conversation. USC is in the driver's seat, like Carl said, because they're undefeated, and if they don't lose a game all year, then they better be in the playoffs. So there is a lot of football to play. Washington, of course, is undefeated as well, so they can run the table. So I think anything can happen. There's going to be a lot of craziness this season. I mean, Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State could easily lose a game this year. So chaos will ensue at some time. And so all these teams need to do is just focus 1 week at a time and get the win and move on to the next week.
Yep, we will certainly revisit the playoff discussion down the line as things start to come a little bit more into focus. I'll say, though, Oregon's kind of a tough sell. They didn't just lose to Georgia. That's putting it nicely. And that's, the defending national champions.
Week one.
Yes. It's tough to evaluate based on that. And as I said earlier, they have definitely rebounded from it. They didn't let it spiral with a new head coach. So good things there. Time to make some picks, guys. And we're going to first show you the games that we're picking, so you will stick around for all of them. All 3 ranked matchups this weekend. We've got NC State, Clemson, Oklahoma State, Baylor, and lastly, we will pick Alabama and Arkansas. We're also giving you picks for Texas A&M against Mississippi State, Michigan, Iowa, and then perhaps a bonus one. We'll let you know in a little bit. But we're going to try to do better this week on the Block Lock. Guys, it has a great name. We just need some results here, so this is our week. But first, we always have to start with the leaderboard, so you know exactly who to listen to. I think you can kind of listen to both of these guys, honestly. After a near flawless week 3, week 4, not as kind, but both of you have come back down to earth just a little bit, but still very solid. Look, Carl, taking the lead straight up, but Blake is ahead in against the spread pick, so a little golf clap. Great job, both of you. Let's keep it rolling here. Since losing to App State, Texas A&M has won its last 2 games by an average margin of just 5, so they've kept it pretty close. Aggies on the road for the first time this season as they head to Starkville as 4-point dogs. Carl, who do you like in this one?
I like Texas A&M. I think they got a lot of momentum. After losing to App State, they seem to have righted the ship with 2 straight wins against top 15 teams. I'm going to go in there. I think they go down to Mississippi State and get a big SEC West win. I'm going to go with the Texas A&M Aggies in this game, 28-21.
Well, I've got Texas A&M, like you mentioned. This is their first true road game. They've found a way to win the last 2 weeks, which has been very impressive, the way they've done it. They will see a lot different style of offense this week. with Will Rogers, who's lighting up the scoreboard, throwing the football, against a very stout Texas A&M defense. I expect the Pirate to take some chances this week and start Vegas. Mississippi State's got a very gambling defense that Duvon A-Chain, I think, is going to get a few times as well. But Mississippi State beat him in Kyle Field last year. I think they beat him again this year, 27-23.
I like it. Right off the bat, we've got some controversy between you two, so the standings will definitely look different next week. Let's move to Michigan, who faced its first team with a pulse on Saturday, and Maryland made life difficult for the Wolverines, and they ended up covering that game. Maryland did. So now they head to Iowa as 11-point favorites. Blake, how do you see this one playing out for Michigan?
Well, this is one of those games that just is going to be a wild game somehow, some way. Michigan has really struggled playing at Iowa. Iowa's defense has been unbelievable this year. Their offense, not so much. So I do think Michigan is going to somehow, some way, find a way to get a few points on the board. Iowa's going to play a tough game, but I think Michigan wins 20-13.
When I look at this game and I look at the University of Iowa, they've struggled quite a bit, scoring. We've talked about that. Defense has been playing well. Michigan is starting to hit its stride a little bit. They've settled in on J.J. McCarthy, but I do think Iowa's defense is still going to be too stingy for them to just completely have a route. I think Michigan wins a close one here, 20-13.
All right. Number 10, Oklahoma State has the highest scoring offense in the country in terms of points per game. Hope you heard that. But now they have to travel to Waco, Texas to take on 16th ranked Baylor. Bears the 2-point favorite in this one. Carl, your thoughts?
Oklahoma State has been lighting up the scoreboard, and that's nothing new. They've had great offenses year after year. But I think they're going to run into a Baylor team coached by Dave Aranda, a guy that is a great defensive coach. And I think that Baylor is going to dominate and control the game at the line of scrimmage. I feel like Baylor pulls this one out 28-24.
Mike Gundy always does an incredible job at Oklahoma State. They're coming off a bye week this week, which you can expect some different wrinkles offensively and defensively for them. But I'm not sold on who they've played so far. I know they've scored a lot of points. Their body of work is not overly impressive. Baylor's been tested twice, lost one of those to BYU. And last week they played at Iowa State. So I like the way that they match up in the trenches. I think Baylor's offensive line and defensive line can match up well, and I think Baylor wins 31-27.
We talked a lot about the parity in the Pac-12. Oh my goodness, the Big 12 has got parity. Not a single team right now has a losing record in that conference. So this is going to be another fun one in the Big 12. The headliner in the ACC, meanwhile, a top 5 matchup between Clemson and NC State. Tigers 6.5-point favorites at home. That's pretty tight. So Blake, who you got in this one?
Well, this is going to be a defensive slugfest because Hurricane Ian is going to play a factor in this game with the weather, field position, special teams, turnovers. It's going to be a game of physicality in the trenches. Who makes mistakes? Got to tackle well in wet conditions and wind. I think that they'll take the air out of the ball, both teams for the most part, maybe a lot of short to intermediate passing routes. I stuck with NC State before the season as a potential playoff team. I'm going to stick with them again, even though the East Carolina game kind of made me wonder a little bit. But I've got NC State 19, Clemson 17 in a wild defensive game.
I believe that even though Hurricane Ian is coming, these teams are still going to have fireworks offensively. You got Devin Leary, the great quarterback for NC State. DJU has finally started to find his stride and mastering the Clemson offense. It's going to be a primetime game on television. I expect it to be exciting, but I'm going to go with the home team right here. I feel like Clemson is going to pull this one out over NC State in a 35-31 contest.
Whew. So you guys see this game going different ways, not from the perspective of who's going to win it or who's going to dominate. But Carl, I love where you're at because these quarterbacks are electric, and I'm really excited about this. But you do have to factor in the weather. Vegas is factoring in the weather. The point total in this one is just 40. Why do you think that it's going to be a shootout when everyone else is zagging and going the other way and saying it's going to be a defensive battle?
These teams are going to go after each other offensively. They're not going to hold anything back. The only people that are worried about the weather are the people that are going to be inside sitting at home watching the game on TV. This is a must-win game. This has college football playoffs magnitude. The guy who wins this game is going to be putting themselves in the driver's seat for a playoff spot. There's no way that they just sit on the football because of the weather. They're going to get after each other.
Blake, how much does the weather affect a game like this? You know, as somebody that was in a locker room and went through all the game planning and what that looks like, we're all talking about it, but is it really that big of a deal, you know, as they lead up to this game?
Yeah, it's a huge factor because, you know, when you're throwing the ball with the wind behind you, it's actually sometimes harder to get the accurate passes that you need to be able to complete passes. And NC State plays a lot of zone coverage. They're going to try to cast a wide net, keep the ball underneath. Clemson will take some chances and mix up their coverages, but usually throwing the ball into the wind is a little bit safer because you can kind of predict it a little bit more. But it's going to be this game's going to come down to mistakes, fumbles, short fields, special teams. It's not going to be the traditional Wake Forest Clemson game that we watched last week where they're just chunking it out in the air on every play. I think it's going to the weather will play a big factor, and these teams are going to really try to feel each other out early because you don't want to make the big mistake early and give the other team momentum.
Nope. And this is a football show, so we're, of course, going to talk about the weather from a football standpoint, but we are all thinking about the people affected by Hurricane Ian and hoping that everyone is safe down there in Florida and all the other places that are affected. But we got to end here with the game of the week. In the SEC, Alabama and Arkansas, and full disclosure, we got two Brockermeyers on the Crimson Tide, so we won't have Blake pick this one. So, Carl, all on you. Odds makers giving the Tide 17.5. Are you taking those points?
Well, I'm not going to take the points. I think that the Crimson Tide is going to win, but I don't think they're going to cover the 17-point spread. I'm going to go with Alabama here in this game, 31-20. I think that they are the better football team. I think that they're going to make some timely plays on offense, and they're going to control the game defensively at the line of scrimmage. Alabama wins this one, but they don't cover the 17-point spread.
Blake, how does Arkansas keep this game close? I believe they are 0-15 against Nick Saban-led Alabama team. That's tough.
Well, they've got to find a way to get to Bryce Young. That is the key to stopping them offensively. Their pass defense hasn't been great, so they're going to have to find a way to get to him. Last year, they snuck a little Tebow fake punt against Alabama, so I'm sure that's something that Alabama's been working on this week is fakes and trying to steal possession against them. And then defensively, Alabama's got a really good defense, and Arkansas's got a really good running game, so it's going to be a test of wills in the trenches on who can stop who, because it's going to be you've got to stop the run if you're Alabama and force KJ Jefferson to throw the ball, which he's capable of doing. And those are the three factors that you're going to have to keep an eye on to see who wins the game.
You mentioned this Alabama defense headlined by Will Anderson Jr. He had the quote of the season this week saying, "The audacity for other people to even step on the field is disrespectful to me." So looking forward to seeing him perform on Saturday. Those are some fighting words. I love it. Okay, guys, just to make things even, though, with Blake in the standings, you get to pick a bonus game here. The Jayhawks, speaking of disrespect, the AP poll voters still don't have them in the top 25, even though they're 4-0. But Vegas thinks that this special season ends on Saturday as Kansas is a 3-point dog at home against Iowa State. does it end on Saturday, Blake? Who you taking in this one?
Well, the AP's treating Kansas like they're an AAC team where you have to have a 2-year body of work before you're entering the polls. So very disrespectful. But I get it. Kansas has been pretty bad for a while, but they look really good this year. Jalen Daniels has been incredible, quarterback, playmaker, Heisman Trophy candidate, if you want to say that. So. He'll be facing a really stiff and stout Iowa State defense that is very stingy. I think it's going to be a really tight game, but I think somehow, some way at home, Kansas pulls it out, keeps the dream season going, and wins 30-29.
Crazy that they're not in the top 25 still, though. After they beat Iowa State this weekend, they got to be in there.
Yeah, they for sure will be if they win this week.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what Coach Lance Leipold is probably telling his team right now: is leave no doubt. Beat Iowa State this Saturday, and you will be in that top 25. And just a fun fact, you talk about this offense, Blake. Kansas is tied for the 4th highest scoring offense in the country. That's alongside, I don't know, Hendon Hooker in Tennessee, who gets a lot of pub for being a great offense. And they're actually above Alabama. So pretty good for Kansas so far this season. Not good, though. Not a great week for the Block Lock, as you guys went 0-2, but that just means that you are primed for a bounce back, and it starts right now. Blake, start us off.
I've got Washington State at home beating Cal. I like Washington State at home. I feel like they're starting to hit their stride. Cam Ward is playing well. Their defense is stout. Cal has looked really much improved this year. And I've been impressed with what Coach Wilcox has done at Cal. He's one of the most underrated coaches in the country. Jalen Ott, Jake Plummer have both been playmakers for them. But I think Washington State at home is going to be too much for them. I've got them winning 38-27.
Carl, who you got?
In the Washington State game or my Block Lock?
Your Block Lock.
So my Block Lock game of the week is Tulane and Houston. I think that Tulane goes on the road and they beat Houston. I think they beat them 21-17. Tulane has been playing good football. Upset a Kansas State team that came back the next week and knocked off Oklahoma. I think Willie Fritz is doing an incredible job there at Tulane, and they're going to go in and knock Houston off.
Carl, we need to talk about this. A lock means you know it's going to happen. It's guaranteed to happen. And this is an upset.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to clarify the rules a little bit. This should be the easy one. Like, oh, I got this no matter what. But does that mean you feel so confident about this?
I feel confident that Tulane is going to go in there and knock off Houston.
Okay. We'll see. It could make it a little easier on yourself, but that's all right.
This was the game a few years ago where Houston's team all soft portaled after the loss to Tulane and ended up taking a red shirt. So it's always a crazy game, close game. So that should be a great game.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one. Tulane already causing some chaos in the college football landscape so far this season. Guys, thank you so much. We'll see how you do next week. We'll check back in to see how the standings all lay out. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. We'll see you back here on Monday to recap all the great games. So enjoy the action.